Have you read that wonderful book yet? Just came out in paperback. No, they can't responds to the conceit that government can fix everything. Well, it can't and it shouldn't try. Government fails, but individuals succeed. But individuals can't succeed when government's constantly in your face, taking your stuff, telling you what you may not do, and government does more of that as it grows. In recent years, it's grown bigger under every president, both parties. Makes me wonder, was there ever a president who didn't grow government? Well, there were a couple, actually, including this guy, Calvin Coolidge. He's never on those best presidents lists that I see, but he should be, says the woman who wrote that book, Amity Shlaes. Coolidge actually stopped growth, cut spending.
Yes, he did. When Coolidge left office, John, in 1929, the federal government was smaller than when he came in 1923.
And yet, the chattering classes, the smug know-it-alls of the political class, he's not liked. He's not.
Well, politicians of either party like to grow government, and he shrank it. And what I found in writing this book was, it was fascinating how he said no, they can't. He said that all the time, John. Whether it was with his 50 vetoes or...
50 times he vetoed Congress. He said it's much more important to kill bad bills than pass good ones.
That's right. He wrote that to his father, who was also a lawmaker. He said, give administration a chance to catch up with legislation. Don't write too many laws. All these interesting phrases that sound so foreign to us now. That's what I like about him. He's a bit different, right? He believed in austerity. He thought if the government was austere, the economy would grow. And the evidence of his period suggests he was correct.
Yet he's blamed for the Depression.
Well, it's kind of a weird history thing. If you don't want to hurt Roosevelt, you have to hurt the people who came before him, don't you?
But Hoover came in between, and Hoover increased spending.
That's right. So I personally blame Hoover more, but Coolidge was the antithesis of Roosevelt, Theodore and Franklin especially. So if you like big spending, big government, you're going to want to undermine Coolidge.
He took naps every day.
Like Reagan. That was Reagan-esque, yeah.
And, you know, people want activist politics. Well, Coolidge, we should say, at the time, he was popular.
Well, that's right. And they said that, you know, now we say governments create crisis and like to. Coolidge tried to make it uncrisis, de-crisis. That was part of his method. And some people noticed that. They said he had developed the art of boring the country into believing that it didn't need government, which is the best.
Mencken made fun of his naps, but also said the itch to run things did not afflict him. How refreshing.
It's interesting, isn't it? And even the White House under Coolidge was pretty modest. He tried not to spend there because he wanted to set a good model so he could get his tax cuts. He did not squander political capital, as some presidents have said. So he would save everywhere to prove that he could cut taxes. He
cut tax rates, eventually down to about 25%, and more money came in.
That's right. He cut taxes lower than Reagan to 25%. Remember, Reagan is 28%. So while he had a balanced budget. So that's kind of interesting. And on top of that, he got more revenue. This was a supply-side experiment that worked. They didn't use the phrase supply side. They said scientific taxation. That's what they called it. But it was because, as Mellon, his Treasury Secretary, said, if you charge less, maybe more trains will come. Principle from business. Make it up on the volume. Charge what the traffic will bear, the traffic of commerce. And the government did get extra money. And in addition, the rich paid more taxes with lower rates.
When there was a disaster, when the Mississippi River flooded, he didn't rush there to say, oh, we're going to help you and government solves this.
That's right. And that was difficult. I mean, it's difficult for a president to say no because the president wants to be loved, right? That's why they're politicians and they want to be reelected. But he thought right at that moment, people wanted a lot of disaster spending and infrastructure spending. History repeats itself all the time, right? And he knew that he wouldn't be able to veto that spending if he went down to the disaster. It would just overwhelm him politically. So he didn't go. And history played a rude trick on him, a tragic trick. His own state was then flooded very soon after. And of course he wanted to go, but he couldn't go to be fair, and he didn't. He didn't go home to Vermont.
He said he did not intend to surrender to every emotional moment. That's all politicians do today.
Well, that's interesting. And yet he was extremely popular. That's what I like about him. Voters liked Cool Coolidge a lot.
If only we could have more of that. Thank you, Amity Schlaze. Silent Cal was a president who acted the way I wish our political class would act. He was humble, promoted small government. That allowed prosperity to happen.